I gotta tell you, I'm really glad today is here. When they ask you in the summer, you think, oh, I got tons of time, I can do this anytime. Well, sort of snuck up on me, and frantically writing even this morning. Some changes and whatever had to go. But first off, I want to thank PW, because Presbyterian women has been such a rock here at this church. They have been here for everybody, whether you know it or not. The ladies of this church are a force to be reckoned with. And so I thank each one of you that have been part of PW. I have to confess, though, when we moved back to Richmond, I did come to First Presbyterian as a teenager. Cute boy, really cute boy. And so I thought, well, this is good. But we moved back to Richmond in '92. I was pregnant with Claiborne, and Charles was just a little tyke running around. And this lady calls me on the phone. She goes, hi. I don't even know the lady's name, but she goes, hi, I'm from First Presbyterian Women, and I want to know what circle you want to be in. And I'm like, I am sorry, that is the last thing on my mind. I have just moved home, I'm pregnant, I don't want to be here, I want to be in North Carolina, and I am just fussing trying to put a house together. She goes, no, we really want to know what circle. And I said, I am sorry, I'm already busy and I cannot handle joining a circle. She kept on and on and on with me, and finally I said, thank you so much for your time, but I'm going to have to leave right now. So I hung up. And, I missed my opportunity, but you know what? She was doing her job. Now, I'll just preface, Kim Lewis and Miranda, we both agreed that is not the way you invite people. So know that we open our arms to you all for Presbyterian women, and anybody, any lady can join, being part of this wonderful circle. And I just am so appreciative of Presbyterian women. But I also want to thank Amy for this morning for, validating all the feelings that I had been having since summer, like putting off, sitting down to write what I'm going to share with y'all. So there's a disclaimer. I'm hoping all of it's true. I'm hoping I hope you receive it, that it's from my heart, and that it's what I truly feel has been a gift from our Father, because He is my Father. But I also want to thank some other special groups. There are 3 of them. The first group is my initial family, the starter group. Mom and Dad in heaven, but I've got my sister, Terrell, and my brother, Charlie, and his wife, Lisa, are here. And I just cannot. They've known me the longest, they've put up with me the longest, they have tolerated me the longest, but I think they've loved me the longest. So thank you all for being a great brother and sister. The second group, which is sort of the cream filling of these folks, is my initial family, led by Shep, who's my husband, and then my son Charles, who is here in front, and our daughter Claiborne is in California right now. I mean, what a tough life. But anyway, they have also walked this walk, but they've been on the inside of the journey. I love you all, and thank you so much for being here and supporting me. And the third group, is a little bit larger, and they are my special friends, and you know who you are, and some of you all are sitting right here in this room, that have walked along with me. And some of you have known me a really long time, and some of you have known me middle time, but we've all shared really sweet experiences. So I thank you to the friends and family. Anyway, onward. I'm taking a deep breath. So how do you prepare for sharing your heart, sharing your faith story, as it would be? I got to thinking about invitations. Okay. Do y'all like invitations? Do you like to receive them? But also, you may get invitations that you really don't want to go to. And you're like, oh, I don't really want to go there. But when you get an invitation, you feel like, oh my gosh, they want me to be there. They want me to come. They want me to be chosen. They've chosen you by an invitation. And so I want you to think about an invitation that our Lord has given to us each day. That we open our eyes, that we make a decision to step out. And that is what sort of started my thinking about invitations. So just think about your invitation. But the Lord, He's always there for us. He's patient, He's loving, and He's also waiting for us to accept His open invitation to us. So in my human way, sometimes I recognize that the invitations are yes, and sometimes I say no, because I am too afraid to accept that invitation. It's hard. It's going to cause pain. It's going to really hurt to make that first step. But again, we have to trust. We have to trust that the invitation is truly from Him. I'm blessed, so very blessed, to come from a family that has a history of being loving, giving, supportive, and super huge cheerleaders of each of our family members and our community. As children, we did all the things that we were supposed to do. We got to church, we said our prayers, we said blessings at the dinner table. You know, we did everything that we were supposed to do. My grandfather, Pop, who was my dad's dad, he even drove around the city of Richmond. His trunk was loaded with toys, with gifts. Now, if you were a girl, you would have gotten a 4-leaf clover pin that had been dipped in gold. He loved to give those. If you were a guy, you had a little bit wider variety of choices. You could have gotten a change purse or a jigger or golf balls. But my favorite was the kitty cat clock that he would give to children. Now, you know those clocks, they're on the wall and they're plastic and the eyes go this way and the tail goes this way. Well, that's what you would get if he thought something special about you. But my grandfather was he was such a giving person. So was my mom and dad. They did it, but they never didn't make a big deal of it. It just was part of what they were, their thoughtfulness. So as I think about my mom and dad and my grandparents, they modeled all those things called fruit of the Spirit, not fruits. And I had never heard of fruits of the Spirit, or even a fruit of the Spirit. But they were modeling those. They didn't put it out there as, this is what we're learning today. These are the fruit of the spirits, and this is what you're supposed to do. But they just modeled those for us. So that was another invitation that they allowed us to feel. Also growing up, do y'all have memories of your childhood or things that happened? Do you have good memories? Are you going through your memories in your mind? I did too. So I had fun going through those. And just being with those memories, there were things that I was chosen to do, whether it was to be on a varsity tennis team or hockey team, or chosen as a flower girl or the rich king at the pageant. But I also had memories that weren't so good, weren't so fun. They were the ones that really hurt. The mean girl at the bus stop that bullied me every day. I'd come home and my mom stood behind me and said, "Turn the other cheek. It'll happen. You will rise above this." She had confidence in me to do that. Yes, I did turn the other cheek, but boy, was it hard. And I look at that girl now, and her life has been hard, and I feel for her. But that was a tough thing that went along there. Watching my mom lose her sister and her two sons in an airplane crash, really, really tough. I don't know if my mom ever recovered from that, but to see her grief and her missing her sister, those are hard things. All of these memories are impactful. to us whether we realize it or not. Well, when we moved to the country, the country, Mannequin, right down the road. But Patterson was only one lane going that way when we moved out there, so it was in the country. My dad said, you know what, I have been on the road all week, I am not driving back into town to go to church. So he decided that he would watch Dr. Robert Schuller in the Hour of Power on TV. How many of y'all are familiar with Robert Schuller? We're all sisters and brothers. Because our dad would watch that, and he would invite all of us to come and watch it. But I think I sat around longer with him. Dr. Schuller, wow, what a positive man he was. He didn't make the wrath of God come down upon you. He was positive. He was hopeful. He gave you reason to want to go and be there with God. He just brought positivity into my life. And so I started following him and leaning into his word of what he was sharing with God. Just some of these you all may have heard. Turn your scars into stars. Tough times never last, but tough people do. You can think negatively or positively. If you're a positive thinker, you will base your decisions on faith rather than fear. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. What great thing would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? The be happy attitudes. Anyone can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in a seed. I just hope that you feel the love and hope that of these simplicities, just really simple sayings that he created, and you can just sort of tuck them in the back of your mind. Okay, my next big passion was teaching. I always wanted to be a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher, my mom's mom was a first grade teacher, and I thought that was exactly what I was supposed to do. I loved playing with her teaching stuff. I would even have school in our playroom at home. And these were my first students right here, Terrell and Charlie. And then I'd rope in neighborhood children to come and sit down. I used Charlie's tool bench. Mom and Dad had given him a workbench, and I confiscated that, and that was my teacher desk. But it was my passion. I just loved teaching. So when I got my own classroom, I thought, I have died and gone to heaven, because now I have my own classroom with children. And fortunately, I realized that I'm better with younger children, like kindergarten, because they're smaller than I am. A lot of times they're more fun. They have this happy attitude, this eagerness to learn. They were so much fun to be around. And I mean, who wouldn't like to walk into a classroom of 5-year and 6-year-olds just loving you? So teaching became my passion, and that's what I have enjoyed so much. So now I got my teaching I'm doing my job, I'm doing my passion, and then a new chapter opened up in my life. Shep Hall started giving me rides to wedding parties. 7 years later. Yes, patience is one of my gifts. I love you. But anyway, here we are, 38 years later, married, and we have the result of 2 awesome children. And ones that I can't imagine not having in my life. And so thank you. Just thanks for asking me. Thanks for choosing me. So, going back and thinking about that marriage commitment, when you say I do, I really took that seriously. Because to me, that was a commitment that I was not only making to Shep as his wife, but I was making to God. And that's who I wanted to be loved by. That's who I wanted to be cherished by. And that commitment has gotten me through the lows but it's also been there for the high mountains when it's really good. But he's always been there at the low lows. And there are low lows. I mean, I had a friend tell me, she goes, right before we got married, she goes, let me tell you something. I've been married for 3 years. And there are some deep, deep valleys that you're going to go through. Marriage is not all hunky-dory. And so when you hear somebody think, oh, it's just bliss, you're like, lying. So anyway, I just put that out there, that was the commitment that I made to the Lord. No matter what, I was going to stay. Another invitation that came along was when Jill Harris came up to me. Our boys were in 4th grade, and she goes, hey, let's teach Sunday school. And I'm like, okay. Our boys? We're going to teach our boys? So I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. Because, that's my passion is teaching. But the thing I didn't know what I was going to teach. We're going to teach Sunday school. You got to know a lot. You got to be one of those big Bible scholars to teach Sunday school. I wasn't that. I was not that. So what happened because of teaching Sunday school? I got to go and be a student alongside those 4th graders. I got to learn with them. And boy, 4th graders, they know stuff. And they know the stories of the Bible. And I was like, ooh, I'm learning with you. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun to learn about Jesus and the stories. Yeah, I knew Noah's Ark. I knew Adam and Eve. I knew the birth of Jesus. But there's a lot more in between. And I think that's what started that invitation started my desire to be more of a learner of the Bible. So off we went. Teaching Sunday school, did Club 4-5, loved it, and then life got in the way as far as they were going to college. Did I want to go to college and see them when they could? Yes. If I was doing that, I couldn't do Sunday school every Sunday. So I had to make a choice to step away from teaching Sunday school. But when I look at those children up there and we see the little disciples go up there and they're learning those stories, I'm like, that's the cutest thing. And that they're learning it and it's fun. It's fun. And it's real. And I just thank you. Please don't ever, ever, ever give up that little time up front with those children, because that's teaching us too, as far as what they're learning, we're learning as well. Okay, another person walked into my life, and it did come from an invitation. Her name is Jenny Lynn, JL, as we call her. She's a gal from Columbus, Georgia. Talks like she fell off a turnip truck. But she is one of his. And she has loved on our family. Terrell and I asked her to come and be a Girl Friday to our children and to drive extra carpools and do whatever we needed, and she did it. But she came, she didn't know us from Adam's House Cat, and she came to Richmond, Virginia to be with our families. It took a while. I'd call her, I'd say, are you thinking about coming? She goes, I'm still praying. And so she'd be praying and praying. Every time I'd call, she'd pray. And I'd say, well, what if I help you along? My way, of course, is going to be better. She goes, what? And I said, well, what if I buy you a ticket and you come and just check us out? So she said, sure, I'll do that. So she comes, and guess what? The weekend she comes, Gaston hits. Terrell's basement is flooding. She goes, Terrell, does your refrigerator usually float in the bottom of your basement? But believe it or not, Jenny Lynn came. She had had a call on her life to come and be with our families. She listened to the invitation. And here we are over 20 years later, and she is still pouring into our family. She dedicated herself to our daughter, Claiborne, for 1 entire year. She was available to her. If Claiborne needed her, picked up the phone. called him. Didn't matter what time or day, Jenny Lynn answered the phone. Jenny Lynn has been there for me, for Charles, for Shep, for my family, extended family. She is called by God, and she listens to what he says to her. You don't know who is coming into your life to impact you. Keep that open mind. My last invitation that I'm going to talk about was the invitation that Laura Wright gave to me to say, you want to go to Israel? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, isn't that where it all started? And not only did I get to say yes, but Blanche said yes, Judy Watkins said yes, and a bunch of other people. But going to Israel put it all into context. You get off that plane and you look around and you go, this is where he walked. This is where he did his ministry. We were there where he was. You go out to Masada, it is the driest land. Your mouth even dries up because it's so sandy, it's so dry. There are no trees, there's nothing. But he is the water of life. And you think about his water being there, feeding all of those people. It just was mind-blowing. Going to where he was born, in Bethlehem, being able to see, I know he wasn't born in a stable, but they say that he was. But we had to go way down into the bottom of this church. I guess land is stacked up. But to be able to be where he was, to go to Bethlehem to see the fields, the shepherd's fields where the sheep were, and you could look up into the sky and you could just imagine angels up there telling them, fear not, don't be afraid. And then you go, you look at the Sea of Galilee, and it's a big body of water. That's where the fishermen went out to fish. Throw your nets on the other side, bring in the haul. Jesus walked on water over there. Oh my gosh, you saw the cliffs where the pigs jumped off, possessed with demons. Unbelievable. And then you see the rock where supposedly he told Peter, you will build my church. But some of the most impressive and moving is you stand above a cemetery and you look and you see the path that he took on that donkey on Palm Sunday. And then you see the streets that he carried that cross to give his life for us. Wow. Don't miss that invitation to go be where he was. So if you don't have it on your bucket list, I'm telling you to put it on your bucket list. As I continue to love the Lord, I'm hungry for more and more of him. I know that I want to live the life he desires for me. I need to open my eyes more, open my ears, open my heart, to realize that his invitations are endless for me and for you. The Lord has blessed me every day with family, friends, and a community, but mostly his love. The invitations will continue to come, and I don't take them for granted. What's your RSVP to his invitation? Thank y'all.
I told them I was really short. I'm so honored to be here today and so excited to see all of your wonderful faces out there. Here we go. Thank you for honoring me by allowing me to speak to you. Cynthia, you were amazing. Your words were spectacular. Mine are going to be quite different because I was not asked to talk about my faith journey. I was asked to talk about a story that has happened in my life. After being here with all of you for over 50 years, you are all my brothers and sisters. You are my church family, and I appreciate all of you so much. And especially my family who is here, and I'll tell you about them in a moment. This story is about Irma and Charles. Irma and Charles.
I can't quite hear you in the back, so I'm going to see if I can get the microphone a little bit better.
Yes, thank you. Irma and Charles were born in 1905 and 1906, and they were married in 1927. But they couldn't have children, and they couldn't have children for 17 years. I know you know, as a member of our church, you know the Taiwo family. They had sextuplets. Irma never did. Irma and Charles never did. But here is their story. It was in the middle of World War II, and Charles was called to go to war. And if he went to war, he would never have an opportunity, they would never have an opportunity to have children, because he would be 40 years old when he got back. You couldn't adopt a child at that point. So my mother's very good friend, Mary, made it her novena. She was a good Catholic, and she made it her special prayer that Charles would be 4F, and he was. So they had reached out to the Children's Home Society of Virginia, and that was the adoption agency from which they hoped to get a child. And one day, they got a phone call, and that call was that there was a little girl that had been born, and she was going to come and live with them. And then they got a letter that said, Margaret Patricia Shawn is not going to be able to come and live with you because she has whooping cough. And so it will be some time until she is well. So when I was 9 months old, I came to live with Irma and Charles. I was their chosen child. I always felt that I was the chosen child. And I was spoiled. The whole family was so happy. All of their friends were happy. All of their friends were their age, and they had children that were in high school and college. So I was their special young child too, because they came over and took care of me and played bridge and brought me presents, and I had a wonderful, happy life with this family that wanted a child so badly, and I was very lucky. Now, when you wait 17 years to have a child, you would think that you would have thought about what the child's name would be. And so they named me Miss Martha. That was my name. There was no middle name. It was on my baptism certificate. Miss Martha. They called me Miss Martha. All their friends called me Miss Martha. Every teacher in all of the elementary school and the high school, they all knew my parents. Alexandria was a small town then. Miss Martha. So when I went to William and Mary, the first day of school, I changed my name to Micki. So they never called me Micki, but I was Micki to everybody that was older than 18 when I met them. It was really hard for my mother especially to send me off. She had devoted her life to me. She'd waited for 17 years and she'd had me for 18, and it was really hard. So for 4 years of college, she wrote to me every single day. It was pretty amazing. I had a wonderful life with Irma and Charles and my Aunt Hoo-Hoo, my mother's sister. She didn't speak or hear, and she was very much a part of our lives every day. And then she lived with us at our house. And after my father died, I moved my mother and Aunt Hoo-Hoo to Richmond, 2 blocks away from where we lived, and took care of them for many years after that. I think when you're adopted, you have especially girls, women, have a special need to know something about your birth mother. And I always wondered about that. And it's your mother that you think about, because it's your mother who gave you away. And she took care of me, I learned later. My birth mother took care of me for 2 years, 2 months, while we were in the maternity home, because all of the nurses had gone to war. So it must have really been hard to give up a baby that you've taken care of for 2 months. I asked the Children's Home Society. I always knew that was my birthplace, Children's Home Society. I asked them to do a search for me. I could not have done that when my mother and father were still living. It would have hurt them. They would not have understood the need to know something about your birth family. But I asked them, and every step took a long time. And I asked them, and they came up with 2 sheets of paper that were what they called non-identifiable information. No names, no places. So I didn't know where I was born, where my birth family came from. I knew nothing except that my birth mother and my birth father met working in a button factory in a small town. Now, this could have been in Minnesota, but it was likely that it was in Virginia. But I had to wait to find out. So all of this was very hard to absorb. He was married, she was divorced in the middle of World War II, and they fell in love and they had a baby, but it wasn't acceptable to keep a baby then or for a long time thereafter. It was an embarrassment and it was a secret. And so no one ever knew about it except one of her sisters. She was one of 6 children, and she was the youngest, and the next youngest was her sister Olga. And she's the only one in the family that knew anything about it. So she kept that secret too. And she lived in the home with her own parents, and they never knew that she had a baby. She was a nurse, and she went off and worked in hospitals and on small jobs, and they never knew. 2 of my friends knew, and they kind of walked this journey with me. It was fun to have someone to share it with, but you didn't want to share it too far. I knew what my last name was, that Margaret Patricia Shawn was me. And so I knew that name, and I knew about the button factory. The button factory was kind of an identifiable thing. So I went across the street and was telling my neighbors about getting this letter, and the doctor across the street heard my story, and the next day he went to the Library of Virginia and he found that there were 2 button factories in the state of Virginia. One of them was in McKinney, one was in Cambridge. And this was starting to sound like maybe I was born in Virginia. That's all I knew were those 2 places, and I didn't know anything about either one of them. But I went to a Weebly football game, and I was sitting next to a good friend who didn't live very far from Cambridge. And I told her a little bit about this story, and I said, do you by any chance know anyone in Cambridge where the name would be Sean or Shaun or Sean? And she said, no, I don't. And I told her about the 2 button factories. And she said, well, we have some really good friends that live in McKinney, Virginia, and we're getting ready to go to the beach with them. So I would like to ask them. And I said that would be wonderful. Well, a few weeks went by, and the phone rang one evening, and it was my friend that I was sitting with at the football game. And she said, Micki, your birth mother's name is Eloise Jones. You have a brother. His name is Bob Shawn. He went to Randolph-Macon College. He went to Duke to law school. He practices law in Fairfax. He was raised as an only child. Wow. This was the first I'd known that I had a sibling. And what do? Do I call him up and say, hi, I'm your sister? That would be like, Jane, I would be saying that to you. Your mother had a baby out of wedlock, and I'm that child. Well, that's pretty shocking. You can't do that to someone. So I didn't want to embarrass that mother if she was still living. And so I hired, once again, the Children's Home Society to do a search, and they did. I got a phone call from social services in Virginia, and they let me know that both my mother and my father were deceased, but that my maternal aunt, my birth mother's best friend and closest sister, wanted to meet me and talk to me, but we had to release each other's names. The state had to release our names. Back in this time, everything was a secret. Now you can just go on Ancestry.com and probably find a brother or a sister in a week. I waited 50 years to find out about all of this, and it was maybe much more fun to find out about it this way. So the phone call ended up that we were allowed to talk to each other on the phone, and we did for a number of weeks and weeks, but she said, you are a secret. I promised my sister that I would never tell this story, and Bob cannot know that he has a sister. And that made me so sad. So time went by, we kept talking on the phone, and we were building a relationship. And she said, I have talked to my daughters, and they think that Bob has to know that he has a sister. So she invited me to come down to Southern Virginia where she lived. She made a wonderful lunch for me. She showed me pictures of the family, pictures of my mother, pictures of my brother as he was growing up, his elementary school yearbook. Elementary school in McKinney, Virginia, started in first grade and went all the way through high school, one book, from infant to college age. And it was amazing. And by the time I left that day, she had given me his address and said, call me when you are ready to reach out to him. Now, I've left out one little interesting, there were so many things that happened that were so alike in my birth family. And me, I couldn't believe it. Aunt Olga that I went to visit, when she was 18, she changed her name to Micki. When I was 18, I changed my name to Micki. Olga and my birth mother, Eloise, had gone on a blind date. And they thought, suppose we don't like these boys. Let's make up names. So they each made up a name. Nobody could remember what my birth mother had used as her name, but she kept her name Eloise. Now Olga, who turned Micki, fell in love with Larry, her blind date, married him, and was Micki for the rest of her life. So the time came, I gathered all my strength and I decided to write my birth brother a letter. So I wrote him a letter. It was 7 pages long. I told him how much I loved the family, Irma and Charles, who had raised me, and what a wonderful upbringing I had had. And I had been adopted. Now here he is, a lawyer, sitting in his office thinking, what is this person writing to me about? Why are they telling me that they're adopted? Maybe they want me to search for their birth family. So I went on in the letter and I explained that I had learned from Children's Home Society that my birth mother's name was Eloise Jones. That was his mother's name. That must have been a shocking part of the letter to read. And then I said, I have met Aunt Micki. I've been to her house. She has told me the whole story. She's always known about it. And so I went on in the letter, and I didn't know when he would get this letter. So the time went by, a few days went by, and the phone rang about 5 o'clock one night, and it was a woman. And she said, Micki, this is Debbie Shawn. I'm Bob's wife. He is so excited to have gotten your letter. He is so moved. He's so happy. But he has cried all day long. And he is very emotional, and he could not call you. So he's asked me to call you and tell you that he is thrilled, and he'll be in touch with you as soon as he can be in touch with you. But it's not going to be today. Let me tell you what his day was like. He cried, and he cried, and then he got up enough nerve after he canceled 2 court cases to call Aunt Micki and talk to her, since I had verified that I had met her. So I know he cried more and more. And then he realized that this was real. He had grown up as an only child. I had grown up as an only child. This was very exciting for both of us. So he was a Phi Beta Kappa. He was really smart. He got the smarts. And he decided, I'm going to look up. In my letter I had said, I have 2 daughters, and I'm married to a judge in Richmond. And so he went to Martindale Hubbell, this law book that tells you everything about lawyers and judges. And it said that there was a judge in Richmond named Walter William Stout. Well, that must be the one. Oh, look, it says he went to William and Mary. Well, look, let's see what age he would. He's the same age as my law partner in the next office. And she went to William and Mary. I'm going to go talk to her about this. So he tries to get rid of all the tears and the red face, and he walks into the room where Beverly Bach is. And he says, trying to be very nonchalant, Beverly, have you ever met someone at William and Mary named Walter Stout? She said, Pete? Why, of course, and I know Micki too. I remember that she was adopted. So of course he burst into tears. Well, that kind of ended the day for him, and his wife is telling me all of this story. And we ended our phone call. She said, he'll be in touch with you. But, so I got off the phone, and in about a half an hour, the doorbell rang. And he had sent me flowers. And so time went on. Each step in this process took time. He needed some time to absorb all of this. And he sent me a very formal letter. It's very lengthy. And he said, I've kept this a secret, but you can see it's typed, and so I had to tell my secretary and receptionist about the story. So it was leaking out a little bit at a time. The letter was so serious, but he said, we'll talk soon. So I was at work, and I thought, I'm going to write him a note. I'm going to just write him a casual note to kind of loosen this up a little bit. So I wrote a handwritten note that said, are you nearsighted like I am? Do you love chocolate? And are you stubborn too? And I put it in an envelope, put it out for the mailman, and I thought, no, I gotta go get that. So I opened it up again, and I faxed it to him in his office. And in a few minutes in my shop, the phone rang, and this deep voice said, I am your very nearsighted, very chocolate-loving, very stubborn brother. So that was just wonderful. And so phone calls continued. We had our very first meeting in April of 1994. This was taken in my house. He and his wife came and visited. We started to get to know each other. Time went by, and he had a family reunion at his house. He had been having them like every 5 years for a lot of years. And so this one was different, because somehow in the invitation he told all 50 of my new relatives that I was his sister, and of course that was shocking news for them too, as it was for everybody. but they all welcomed me with open arms. But the best one was Uncle Frank. Uncle Frank lived in McKinney with his children. He was way up in his 80s. He had a brain tumor and he was dying. He had a patch over his eye. He had his country overalls on. And he stepped out of that car and he looked at me and he said, "Lord, child, you look just like her." I'd never looked like anybody before, except maybe Ashley. So that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship that I had with Bob Sean, his wife. Kept up a relation with some of the relatives, maybe not the California ones or the ones from Florida, but it was a wonderful gift in my life. We would often meet in Fredericksburg because he was up in Northern Virginia and I was here. So we would meet in Fredericksburg and have lunch together. And the first time we met there, it was near Christmas time, and he had a gift for me. And it was this necklace.
Oh, wow.
It is a U.S. gold piece minted in this country in 1994. So I would always remember the year that we met. So we had many weddings and things, visits back and forth over the 19 years that I knew him. And he and his wife Debbie were a great gift to me to add to my already wonderful family. I'd like you to meet my family. Ashley and Mark Miller, who live in Richmond and have 2 daughters. Kenan and David Ibbotson, and one of their daughters, Avery, and Buddy Goody Kinnison. Thank you for letting me tell you my story.